Hi everyone. Good afternoon or morning, whatever jet lag time zone you're in. So this is a real picture that I took 2 weeks ago. I was on an island, or actually it's a country, but there are only 11,000 people there, and it's in the middle of the Pacific, just kind of in the middle of nowhere, called Tuvalu. Not many people go there, but it's gorgeous. Highly recommended. There are no ATMs or any normal amenities or hot water, uh, but you get that. So today I'm going to talk about being a digital nomad, which is a lifestyle I've been doing for the past 3 years. First, some of you might know me as Natasha the Robot, and I write a blog, natashatherobot.com. Many people used to be on my newsletter, This Week in Swift. I recently stopped doing it, but you might know me from Monday morning emails. And I also run a Swift job site and a Try Swift conference. And the Try Swift conference is really awesome because it combines my passion for Swift with my love for travel and bringing people from all over the world together. Because I think in today's world, we're more and more trying to be pulled apart. But at Try Swift, we host a conference in Japan, in India, in New York, we have people coming in from all over the world, both to speak and attend. Satoshi here in the front, he's my Try Swift Tokyo organizer. So he's a rock star there and does a lot of work to help out and bring the community together. And we have a lot of people from that conference coming here and connecting. And that's, to me, is the most rewarding, bringing those cultures together. And I'm just going to do a shameless plug. We have a Try Swift in San Jose on Friday. So if you're interested, it'll be more workshop style. So if you're interested in contributing to open source, the Swift team will actually be there to help you with any bugs. And we'll have people, again, from all over the world coming together. But outside of tech, as I mentioned, I live this digital nomad lifestyle. I don't have a home. I don't have many possessions. All my possessions fit into one suitcase that I travel with. So some people, actually, I'll come there trying to give me swag, and I have to politely decline. And I'm sorry, I can't. If I can't fit this in my suitcase, I'll feel bad throwing it out, so I'd rather just not take it. I'm also bad at accepting physical gifts. It's the same thing. So if you ever want to give me a gift, I take food and experiences. And I've been doing this for the past 3 years. I actually gave a similar talk about 2 years ago when I first started being a digital nomad. It's online, and it talks about all the difficulties I've encountered with that lifestyle. But today it'll be more kind of what my life is like now, which has become more normal. I kind of got past the first year of just like, what am I doing? What's happening? I'm trying to figure my life out. To, okay, this is kind of how my life is. And I plan to keep it that way for a long time, hopefully. So the first thing people ask me is, how many countries have you been to? Well, the truth is, I don't really count. I don't care. I know some people out there are pretty stickler about like going to every single country. Actually, Tuvalu, because it's such a small, off-the-grid country, it's popular for its stamps. So the tourists are sometimes stamp collectors just so they can say, I've been there. So they'll just come to this country just to get a stamp. So I got a bunch of stamps that I plan to put on my suitcase. But for those who are curious, this is a map from Jet Lovers. And they track all the flights I've taken over the past 3 years, and I've traveled before that as well, so I guess I've been to more countries, but to me it's really about living in the moment. So that's why I don't care. I don't have a goal of I need to visit this country. I also travel very slowly. I like to stay in a country for 1 to 3 months, ideally. It doesn't work out all the time. And have a routine and get to know what it's like to live like a local. Most of the time I'm just working, but then on the weekend I'm in a foreign country. So I get to go do something really cool, or even eating lunch during the day is an exciting experience because there'll be foreign food, or even when you walk there, it's a cool experience. I'll take a 2-hour lunch break, go see what the town has to offer, and then go back to work. So that's kind of how I've been living. And today I want to start with like a pretty personal story that I don't share publicly very often. But this was sort of a pivot point in my life. So I was in my late 20s, and I was living in San Francisco. I had a regular job, and I came home one day, and I took a drink of water, and for some reason this thought came into my head. And the thought was just I don't know what happened, but the thought was, what if I don't have children? And the way I grew up, in my family, that's the only way of life. I was always told, when you grow up, you're supposed to have kids. And that was always a question of when, not if. So one of the things to think about is how society or your family or your community influences these type of decisions. So until I was in my late 20s, I always thought the kids was a one question. I didn't ever think of if scenario. And for some reason, that day, it popped into my head. I followed this thread, and I realized that that's what my life, everything fell into place for me personally. Because there was always this pressure in the back of my head ever since high school that was like, okay, so I need to do well in my career, and then I have to find a husband, I have to get married, I have to get a house, then I have to have kids, all by the age of 30. Because I was told that that's kind of when the timeline for biological clock for women ticks. So I was like, how am I going to do that all the time, right? So I'm just rushing and trying to make it happen always. It's always in the back of my head. And then that day I realized, what if that doesn't happen? And I'm like, oh, I can travel the world. I can pursue a career. I don't have that pressure. And that was sort of a pivot point that kind of in my life that made it very easy to become a nomad. And the point of the story is not that whether you should have kids or not, that's a personal decision, and I have nothing against having kids. That's just not for me personally. But the point is that the society or your community, they kind of force certain decisions on you without you realizing, right? So I've gone for more than 25 years thinking that planning to have kids, which is never a decision that anyone questioned, or that even I questioned, because the community I grew up in, I didn't see any other type of lifestyle. Yes. So I'm kind of paving my own path, and my family's not happy. My grandma will yell at me. But hopefully they'll get over it. I don't know. As I get older, I don't know. But so that's what I want to talk about. If society or my community was able to influence me in this big decision, think about everyday truths and decisions that you're making or that you're not actually making, right? That your community is making for you. And as a digital nomad, someone who travels the world, I'm in a unique position where I'm sort of an outsider of society. So I don't really have a community, which is really hard. This is one of the hardships, right? So I don't live in one place. I don't see the same people every day. I have friends around the world, but I don't have one stationary community that I belong to. So I don't live in my own country in the US, or sometimes I do, but even then I won't be living where I know anyone. And when I'm in a foreign country, I'm in this nice position where I personally, one of the things I love about travel is learning about other cultures. I'll even dress up in their outfits. I'll go to their church or temple. I'd love to participate in their festivals, right? So I'd love to do everything they do, but I also have this kind of foreigner card where if I don't agree with something, or if I don't want to do something, or if I don't want to eat something, I can just say, that's great, but I'm a foreigner, or if I mess up, I can say, oh, I didn't know, I'm sorry, I didn't know this was your culture. So I don't have a community I fit into, in the US locally where I grew up, but I also don't have to fit in abroad. And this is a quote, great quote, from Rita Golden Gelman, who wrote this incredible book. It's called A Tale of a Female Nomad. And for the guys in the audience, if you like to read, I hope you're not intimidated by the word female, because it's like the most incredible nomad book I've read. And she's kind of my inspiration, even though I'm already a nomad, but she's this woman who had a normal life, right? So she actually got married, had kids, had a house, has a husband. She was an LA socialite, so had a completely normal life. And then one day when she was 48, she ended up divorcing her husband and becoming a nomad. And I think she's still a nomad. This was in 1987, the year that I was born. So, and the way I travel is kind of like nice, but the way her first trip was basically going to Mexico City, hanging out, then she's like, I want to live in a village. So she starts like just hiking on the highway to this village. And this is before phones or internet in Mexico City in the 80s. And then she just hitches a ride on some random guy's truck, arrives in this village, and like talks them into living there for a month. So and this is like her first opening story, so you can imagine this woman, and she went from like LA socialite to just giving everything up, becoming a nomad for, I guess now it's been like 30 years, and just crazy person, but really awesome and inspirational. And this is her quote. Once I leave the US, I'm not bound by the rules of my culture. And when I'm a foreigner in another country, I'm exempt from the local rules. This extraordinary situations means that there are no rules in my life. I am free to live by the standards and ideals and rules I create for myself. So this is what I'm going to talk about, kind of the rules that I've discovered, things that before I've taken for granted, or just things of, hey, this is how the world works, to being the new normal, which is sometimes the opposite or completely different from what I was living before, or just something I wouldn't have questioned before that's completely different in my life now. So I'll go through, I have 10 examples, but I didn't really time my talk, so if I run out of time, I can stop earlier. So the first one that is on everyone's mind, I know, because I get this asked a lot as well. How do you afford to travel? So money, and this is, I think, one of my favorite currencies. It's from Norway, and instead of having a president or a politician on their bill, they just have fish. So I'm happy to have fish for president. Maybe we'll have world peace then. The thing is, when you're a nomad, money works very differently than when you're stationary. And when I lived in San Francisco for 5 years, I got paid a lot, but I could barely afford my monthly bills because the rent is so high, and I heard it's even higher. So I don't know how people afford it now even. And I had debt. But after traveling the world for 1 year, I was able to be debt-free. So it's actually cheaper to travel the world than living in San Francisco. But also, but there are a lot of reasons this is true. It's actually cheaper to travel the world than living in a lot of places. And the first thing to consider is your monthly fixed expenses. You're paying rent, you're paying for electricity, you're paying a car payment. When I first moved to DC, I couldn't afford furniture, so I bought it, and then I had to pay 0 APR for 12 months type of thing. So that was a monthly expense. So there are a lot of expenses that are really high that are associated with your monthly living in a stationary way. But as a nomad, those expenses are gone. So if you think about the times you go on vacation, your expenses are actually really high because not only are you paying for your 2-week vacation or 1-week vacation, you're still paying rent at home. So you're paying a lot for this vacation, and you still have to pay your rent even if you're not there. But for me, if I'm somewhere, that's all I'm paying. I don't have the extra monthly payments. But the other idea of having flexible payments is that I can choose where in the world I get to be. I get paid in US dollars. Well, that means different things in different countries. So in the US, it's more expensive, but I can go to Thailand and I can get a massage every day for $5 to $10 and live like a queen at like $500 a month, right? So, and that's like very nice standard. So I have complete control of how much I want to spend month by month just by going to certain destinations that I need at the time. So sometimes I'll spend, 2 months in Japan and it'll be expensive, or New Zealand, but then I'll spend 3 months in Thailand, and then on top of that, long-term travel is a lot cheaper. So I stay in Airbnbs. If you get an Airbnb for a week, as I know in San Jose, that's very expensive. They're charging you, the tourist vacation price. But if you get an Airbnb for a month, then you're in a better negotiating position. And as a person who has a good Airbnb record, I'm clean, I'm quiet, I'm just working. I'm not gonna party in their Airbnb. I have a good negotiation stance, and they'd rather have me for a month, paying a certain amount, than the possibility of having a random person come for a weekend. They're not gonna get as much money. They're not gonna have a good tenant either. So that's one thing. But on top of living in an Airbnb, there are other choices. So one of my friends, he lives in hostels. He loves hostels. And you can get those even in New Zealand, which is expensive. It's like $16 a day. If you go to most other countries, you can get hostels for $8 a day. And that's what, in the Female Nomad book, she usually paid $8 a day for accommodation in a village. And she lived on $10,000 a year, actually, and she lived really well by going to certain countries. So not only do I have control over where I go and what my monthly expenses are, I have control of switching up. Hey, maybe I want to live in a cheaper place in this country, but maybe more expensive here, and I can all plan it and have that flexibility that if you live in one place, you don't have. And then the other expensive part of travel is airlines. So the thing is, if you live in one place and you need to go to Europe, from San Francisco, that's an $800 flight. So that's why it's expensive, because every time you travel, if you go far, if you want to go to a cool exotic place, it's expensive. You have to fly halfway around the world. But the way I travel is I just go slowly around the world. And there are a lot of cheap airlines. So if I'm in Thailand and I want to go to Vietnam, that's probably a $100 flight on AirAsia. That's not a big deal for me. And it's right there. But if I lived in San Francisco and I want to go to Thailand, that's maybe $1,000. And then let's say I want to go to Vietnam, that's another $1,000 trip. So just by doing that, those are some examples of how being a nomad is actually not that expensive as it looks. It's actually a lot cheaper than that, but also you have a lot more control than you do when you live in one place over how much you want to spend. Next thing I want to talk about is time. So this is something, I grew up in Chicago, and the winters in Chicago are brutal. I learned that I'm energized by the sun. I'm just like the Energizer bunny, and the sun powers me up, and once the sun goes down, I'll just be sleeping. It's kind of crazy. That's just how my body works. And in Chicago, there's no sun. Even during sunlight hours during the winter, there's no sun. It's just gloomy and horrible. And I'd get depressed, but I didn't know about SAD, like the seasonal affective disorder, because it wasn't a thing. So I would just be miserable in the winter. But now that I know that about myself, that I just need sun, I can manipulate time. And when there's sun, I'm happier, I'm more productive, I can do more things, right? So the cool thing about the world is that there's like a north hemisphere and a southern hemisphere. Even like when I was in Amsterdam in the like November, the sun goes down at like 4 p.m. and my body would be like, oh, time to sleep. And I'm like, it's 4 p.m., I need to work. And that's when I realized like, oh, I can go to New Zealand and they're having summer right now. So I can optimize time in a really weird way that you can't when you're living in one place and you're sort of stuck with seasons. So for my health, like it's made my life better actually to manipulate that time. And I experiment with time a lot. So this picture is actually midnight in Norway. They have 24 hours of sunlight in the summer. And it sort of feels like, for me at least, like being on a coffee high all day long, even though I don't drink caffeine. But the sun just like energizes me, and you can go, and then you start questioning the idea of time, because like I don't need to go to sleep at 8 p.m. and wake up at 4. I can go to sleep at midnight, I can go to sleep at 2 p.m., like it doesn't really matter. The time is always there. I can go hiking at midnight and like stay up all night and then like maybe take a nap when I want to. So the concept of time kind of changes when you're a nomad. You don't have to suffer through the winters. But alternately, some people, I'm a morning sun person, but one of my friends, Chris, is here. He's actually more of a night person. So he's been working remotely, but he went to Southeast Asia for vacation and kind of stayed and became a nomad. For him, he's more of a night person, but he'd wake up maybe at like noon. You can ask him the details, but he'd wake up, then he would like go do all the stuff. He had to work on San Francisco time, so he could only work at night, but he'd wake up and he had a full day to like go see museums, go see temples, go learn something, chat with people, like all this stuff. And then he'd work at night, and that works really well for him personally because he's better at working at night and he gets to do stuff during the day. Versus before, when living in San Francisco, he'd wake up, go to work or do work, and then just have a normal like go to sleep, do some stuff. So he feels like he like doubled his life, right? Because now he has like all this extra time to do stuff. You can talk to him about that. So you can really experiment with the time and see what works best for you personally. Next, I want to talk about health. So as someone who grew up in America, we basically learned that health is a pill. Any ailment you have, you go to the doctor and they give you a pill. Even when I was working, in the winter time, and everyone in the office was sick. That's just normal in the winter. And I got sick, and I wanted a day off, so I called my manager and I said, hey, like I need a day off, I'm sick. But all he said was, well, I'm sick too, but I took a pill and I came to work. And that's sort of the idea in America. We have all these pills, so then you're forced to come to work. And I think of pills as sort of like a poisonous Band-Aid. It kind of clears, you kind of feel better enough to go to work, but in the long term, it makes your problem worse. So as I've been traveling around, health is one of the big things that I've been interested in, especially Eastern medicine. And because I travel, I get exposure, like I like to learn in every culture what their specialty is. And one of the big things I found was actually the Ayurveda medicine in India that I never knew about. Because in America, just take a pill, right? But in Ayurveda, the concept is that food is medicine. Unfortunately, the drug companies cannot make money by telling you that you should just eat certain foods. And even if you do want to eat healthier, the idea of what's good to eat is a hard concept. So, but in Ayurveda, we talk about like quantified self, right? The idea that you can track your progress and see how you do well. Well, Ayurveda, you could think about as 5,000 years of quantified self. So it's the most ancient medicine in the world. It's time tested. And when I went to an Ayurveda resort, they told me, they didn't say, hey, go on the Atkins diet or go on the South Beach diet. They actually know that not health is different for every type of person. So they identified my body type, they did a detox, and then they told me what to eat. And even though I thought I was eating healthy, but because of the body type that I have, I learned that, for example, like I can't eat tomatoes because that'll throw my body off balance. And you'd think tomatoes are healthy, and I used to eat like tons of tomatoes. But now I'm like, okay, so not only there's foods that are healthy, there are foods for your specific body type. Or almonds, right? You'll read almonds as a superfood. It's great. Well, it's not great for my body because it's oily. And then I used to have skin problems. And when I went to the doctors, dermatologists in the US, it wasn't that bad. But when you go to a dermatologist, they wouldn't ask anything about me. And they would say, hi, okay, you have skin problems. Here's a pamphlet of 3 different treatment options. One of them is going to be like a cream, less extreme cream, hormonal cream, which is kind of scary with side effects. And the more extreme option was like, we'll remove your pores. Something like that. It'll take you like months, and we'll have to monitor you closely. So that's what they told me. But when I went to the Ayurveda resort, they said, well, and they made me feel like a sort of like a weird anomaly because I have this skin problem. They're like, oh, we don't know what it's from. You have this skin problem. Here's some pills or treatment options that are very aggressive to solve this. But when I went to the Ayurveda resort, they identified my body type, and they actually said, well, your body type is prone to skin problems, and here's how you solve it. And when they treated me, they didn't do anything for my skin because that was unrelated. It was just what I was eating. And after a week at this resort, eating the foods that are correct for my body type, my skin was just glowing. And they didn't have to give me expensive creams or any of that stuff. And after following that type of diet that works for me, I was able to get rid of a lot of my health problems naturally over a longer time, over like 3 years. But that's the problem. Like if you take health as a lifestyle, it takes a lot longer to cure your issues versus a pill, but you actually cure it naturally and unprofitably for the drug companies, which cause more issues, and then you get more sick, and then they get to, cure you more with drugs and operations. But I will mention that, of course, if you need serious surgery, like, you broke a leg, you want Western medicine, but there's a lot of health you can do that's already proven and out there that nobody in the US told me about. So by traveling, I got to kind of question, okay, how do I cure myself? How do I live my best life? And learn about all these cool different ancient medicines that work in the long term. And they actually help prevent issues that are more serious that do need Western medicine. Next one, another thing, you could be happy alone. This is kind of it's sort of a taboo in society. So before this, I was in Fiji, which is the only place you can fly to Tuvalu from, so I just spent about 2 days there. And I went to this resort. It's like a touristy resort, the Hilton. And I would go to a restaurant at night, and I'm a very happy nomad. Like, I'm happy with friends, but I'm also happy by myself. And every time I'd go to the hotel restaurant, they say, okay, what room are you in? And then they're like, table for one. And I was like, yes, for one. And then they'll confirm in like a sad voice, like, just one? And there's like no way, and then like inside I'm happy, like I'm in Fiji, it's beautiful, I'm having the best time. But I just felt like I'm almost crazy for being happy, because they're just like, for one? Like they'd be like so sad. And that's sort of a weird thing in society. When you live in a community, it's kind of taboo to be happy alone. And if you think about kind of all the wording that comes with it, like you're trying to find your other half. You're not full until you find that other half of another person who makes you happy. Then you can start living your life. Even like I was in a juice bar in New Zealand. It's a juice bar, like not even like a hotel holiday resort from like honeymooners or something. And the lady was asking, she's like, do you want your order now or do you want to wait? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, why is she asking that? I was like, yeah, now. She's like, oh, I thought you'd be waiting for someone. Like, how did she get that? Like, I just went to a juice bar and ordered juice. But apparently I can't do that alone, because that's not acceptable. And of course my grandma will yell at me and say, you can never be happy alone. Go find yourself a husband and give me grandchildren. So I think that's sort of, I don't know, I just want to say that being happy alone is okay. And it's possible. And maybe if you're happy and then you date someone who's also full and happy, then you can have like a really magical relationship versus, I guess, the current, I don't know if people have seen the movie Lobster. Just, yeah, it's kind of like people get matched up based on defects about themselves. It's kind of a crazy movie. But it's like, that's what society wants. Like, you're not full, you have some defect, and the other person is supposed to like fill a hole in you. But that doesn't sound fun to me, because I don't want to be responsible for making another person happy. I can't do that. Like, I can't, that's a lot of responsibility. So I'd rather work on being happy alone and then, be together with someone who's also happy, and then we can have a good time and we're not responsible for and feeling bad when that person is not happy or I'm not happy and blaming them for my unhappiness. Next up, friends. So this is sort of a funny thing. By detour, I mean like a really big detour here. So when I was living in San Francisco, I don't know, everyone is busy here, so it's kind of even hard if you do want to see friends. It's like this long, like, when are you available? When are you available? And if your friend lives in San Jose and you're living in San Francisco, that's just like never gonna happen. It's just not. So that happened to me. I had a friend who lives in San Jose. I was living in San Francisco, and I didn't even see her for years while living in the Bay Area, because it was just too much work to ever come here, and it was hard for her to come there. And then like we still kept in touch, and while I was in Thailand, she messaged me and said like, she's from Vietnam, and she's like, I'm going like to visit my family in Vietnam. Do you want to come? And when you're a nomad, like, going from Thailand to Vietnam is like, oh yeah, that's right there. But going from San Francisco to San Jose, like, no, that's too much. So after like probably like 5 years of not seeing her, something crazy like that, I got to meet her in Vietnam because it was like an easy decision to make. Of course, I want to go to Vietnam. And she showed me around for a week, and we had the best time. So I do that a lot. Another one was just sometimes, like I saw my friend from Japan, she checked in at the train station in Milan, and I was like, oh, I'll be in Milan tomorrow. So I messaged her, and she's like, well, I'm not staying here, I'm staying about 2 hours away. I looked it up, I was staying 2 hours away the other way. But I'm like, oh, she's a friend. So I went and like kind of was like, whatever, probably be tired, I can sleep later. And I made the detour, went to see her, and she was actually staying in this small town in Italy, which is just gorgeous, Cremona, where they used to make violins. They're like known craftsmanships for making violins, and she had connections, so I got to go see a violin maker shop, and like she was making a violin and testing it, and I got to see like a concert where they compared like an old violin and a new violin. So this is something that I would have never done myself or even known about, but because I'm willing to take detours to like other countries, they're just far away. It sort of works. This is picture also Chris and Jimmy. This is my detour while I was in New Zealand. So Tuvalu doesn't have ATMs and they accept Australian dollars. And I'm like, should I go to and bank in New Zealand, which sounds stressful, or like just fly to Australia? I'm like, that sounds easier. And of course, Jimmy, who's also, and Chris, who we've traveled together in India at Try Swift India. So, I like both of them, and Chris was doing a layover there, Jimmy lives there, so I'm like, okay, like I can go for a 3-day weekend, see them. So friends are a no-brainer, and to me also, because I travel alone so much, I always prioritize seeing friends over work. That's a no-brainer, but I think when you live in a city in the high-pressure situation, then it's always like, oh no, I have work, I can't see you, right? Even if you live next door, it's like a big thing to just like meet someone. Like, I don't want that, but now it's much easier in a weird way because it's more exciting. Let's go to a new country together. Next question I get asked, but isn't it dangerous to travel, especially alone? And the best story I can think of is when I traveled to Istanbul. So I would have never picked to go to Istanbul because all I knew about it was what I've seen on the news. And I don't even read the news, but you've heard about there are bombings there. So that's all I knew about Istanbul. Like I didn't do any research, but I was like, oh, I'll never go to Istanbul because I just assumed everything was just blowing up there. But then I ended up booking a flight from Argentina to India and Turkish Airlines, and they had a 24-hour layover in Istanbul. It was the cheapest flight, so I was uncomfortable because I only thought, I was just like, this thing's going to blow up while I'm there. But I was like, okay, I'll just go. I'll sleep in an airport hotel. I won't leave. And that's it. Like, that should be okay. But then I learned that Turkish Airlines has a free, they give free tours of Istanbul if you have a long layover. So they give 4 to 8 hour tours. They take you from the airport, show you around, even give you lunch, and bring you back in time for your flight. So while part of me was like, oh, I'm never going to leave, I'm too scared. The other part was like, well, free tour as a nomad, like, I'm going to do that. And then I figured, okay, if something bad happens, the airline will probably be one of the first to know about it. And so I get on this bus, we get out of the airport, and I was just shocked because all I saw was traffic. It was early in the morning, and people were just staying in traffic, going to work, listening to music, drinking coffee. It could have been 280, standstill traffic. It was not anything special. So, I had this danger that was in my mind because of the news. But the news is, it's true, but you don't get to hear from the news, hey, it was another normal day in Istanbul, nothing happened. People are happy going about their business. So that was kind of shocking. But the other side of danger, actually, sort of like a weird, funny thing. I grew up in the US, and as I started traveling, people ask me, where are you from? I'll say, I'm from the US, and they'll say, but isn't it dangerous to go there? I'm too scared to go there. And then what news do they see? They see gun violence. They think you come to the US, you get shot. And I was like, no. But then I thought about it, and I was like, well, there was that one guy who brought a gun to my high school. Luckily, someone reported him before he used it, but that has happened. I was in a hackathon a few years ago in a college, and we had a lockdown. And that was actually scarier because in high school, the gun thing kind of went unnoticed. It was sort of reported after the fact. But when I was in college, we actually had to like log down. We didn't know what was happening. I was like, is there going to be a guy like coming in, like shooting us? And it ended up being some guy with a knife, not a gun, but it was like terrifying. And I've noticed that even when I'm in other countries, like in Italy or New Zealand, I like to walk around. And if I accidentally walk on what seems like private property, my immediate thought is, oh no, someone could shoot me. And I'm like, oh no, I'm in a country where they don't have guns. It's okay. So I guess US is not as safe as I thought from living here, right? And other countries, it's the same. People are just living. They're trying to go about their lives. They want the same thing. They want to have food. They want to raise their family. So most of the time when you go to the other country, there are some countries that are maybe in war and stuff, so maybe don't go there. But a lot of countries and a lot of travel that you think will be dangerous, it probably comes from your stereotype of watching the news and only bad things on the news. And it's actually could be dangerous in your own country, and you're just used to it. You just don't think about it. So taking candy from strangers. This is something that's drilled into us by society when you're little. I was actually in New Zealand a few months ago, and I was walking on this hiking path, and there were some school kids with their teachers walking past me. And there was this cute girl, and she was like very excited, and she said, hi, and she was just excited to say hi to me. And it was like really sweet, and I said hi to her. I think we high-fived even. And then right when she did that, her teacher said, hey, don't talk to strangers. So like I'm a scary, but that's the default. We're taught from when we're little, don't talk to strangers, don't take candy from strangers. But as a nomad, it's actually what I found is that strangers are really helpful and nice and kind, and that actually overwhelms me because I'm really independent. And when someone like carries my suitcase or puts it up, like it's just like, wow, they're so nice. This is from, I don't know if the animation worked. There we go. This is in Thailand from the Yipeng festival that was on my bucket list. And this festival, you're supposed to get these huge lanterns, light fire, like this would never be allowed in the US. I don't know how the whole city actually doesn't burn down. And then you have to like wait for 10 minutes for the gas. It's kind of like a hot air balloon. You have to wait for once the fire is lit, you wait for it to kind of fill with gas, and then you can let it go and it floats. Well, I was alone. Everyone else was with other people or their families. So I went to buy a lantern, like that's the whole reason I was there. And I asked the lady, like, hey, can you help me? Because I was not comfortable lighting a fire by myself, like this big fire, and like holding it down, and I didn't know what to do. So this lady who could have been selling instead helped me for probably over like 15 minutes. That's how long it takes. And she even like took a picture of me doing it, which is really awesome. And then after I did that, I was like, wow, I'm like so grateful. And I asked her, I was like, can I pay you? Like my immediate thought was like, okay, I'll pay her for her time. And in Thailand, they love to take advantage of tourists. So it's not like that's what I thought she was doing. But she like refused to take my payments. I'm like, she like took 15 minutes of her time where she could have sold probably a bunch of lanterns and like helped this like single girl trying to light fire. I actually ended up, when I was letting go, there was this guy who was like sitting, and then suddenly he got up, so he could, like his head could have been on fire. So I'm not a good with fire. Yeah, so people are really kind. Like it really overwhelms me, and that's a misconception that we have. Don't talk to strangers. We're always told that, but it's just not true. I don't know if I've seen like mean strangers. Most of the time, people really want to help. And honestly, there are bad people in every country. So, if there is a bad person you encounter, I don't think it's based on that country or anything like that. Let's see, it looks like I'm sort of out of time, so I'll just skip the other ones. So the things I talk about, hopefully, and I'm happy to talk more with people, I'll be around after the talk, are things that, if you live in one place, you're really influenced by the people you live with. And the thing is, it's really hard to change, even, it's really hard to change who you are because the people around you, they might like similar activities. And if you want to do a new activity, they might say, that's weird, why are you trying that? Because they're not used to you having a role where you try a different activity. The next thing I was going to talk about is that I grew up with parents who took me traveling, but they took me to cities. And now that I'm growing up, I'm like, well, I like hiking, but I don't have the skills to do it. I don't know how to do it. I love nature. I'm trying to learn it. I'm going on as many kind of hiking trips as I can. I'm trying to learn everything, but I'm still worried to do it. And that came from traveling. Even as I was hiking, I called my mom, and she's like, wait, you're going alone? Like, what if you get hurt? She like kind of said all these doubts that I had, and I'm like, oh, my doubts come from my family about hiking. That's why I'm scared. Their fears came onto me. And I wasn't able to try this out while I was with them, but as I was able to kind of get away from society and community and try to explore, go to a different place where nobody is judging me, or I don't think judging is the right word. They're just having some kind of pressure because you're used to doing certain activities with your friends or your community. So you might not even discover that you like some other activity, or you have some dormant talents that you never know just because you grew up in a certain society, in a certain community that have made decisions for you in different times of your life. So many of us are in tech. That's why you're here. So I'm hoping you think about that because societies are influencing, but tech could be a way to break that influence. If you have a productivity app, why not, put in, hey, it's okay to do an hour of nothing today. That would be pretty radical, but that could change someone's mind towards productivity. So you have to really think about not only like what are the influences that are implicit in society, but also if we want to change that, how can you make your apps reflect that and help people change or try to think outside their box that they live in. So that's it. I'm happy. I don't know if I'm allowed to take questions, but I'll be around as well. Thank you.
I think we've got room for 5 minutes, right? Everybody good? Okay. Here's one question. Visas, and then maybe, if you've got time, a little bit of, there is some certain safety aspect of letting people know where you're going or how to get in touch with you in case of a family emergency. How do you handle those two things? So yeah, first one, visas.
So for family emergency, I guess as a traveler, like, I can't do anything. I'm big on turning off my I turn on Do Not Disturb at night, and I even turn off Wi-Fi because I'm glad Apple added all those type of features, but at night I want to sleep. And if there's an emergency in Chicago where my family is, I literally cannot do anything about it. So if I get sleep and I wake up and I see the emergency, I'll figure out from there. But in terms of, I guess, other people's emergency, there's not much I can do, so I don't think worried is the right case, but I'll see it when I see it, but there's nothing I can do. And then, I don't know, I check in on Foursquare. I'm not very good with safety, maybe. A lot of times I travel with friends, so that helps. I don't know. yeah, if I feel very unsafe in the country, then I'm probably traveling with friends. And then if I do feel uncomfortable with going to a country for the first time, I'll usually go for only a week as a tourist. And I'll be more like, I'll stay in a nicer hotel and check it out and then get the feel for it. Like Thailand was an example. If for some reason it was scary to me, I went there for a week and I was like, oh, okay, this is not scary. And then I came back for like 3 months. So that's sort of what I do, but I think I should have pepper spray. I'm going to Alaska, so I'm researching bear spray. So that's probably the most research I've done for a country for safety. I think someone else.
The visa question. Do you worry about are you going to a lot of places that just accept American things, passports for 3 months, or are you doing visas too?
Yeah, so that's kind of a privilege that we have as Americans. Most countries, you can get visa on arrival for 30 to 90 days. I do get visa for some countries that most people will not need visas for. So one example is India. I went there too often, and I could only do the online visa 2 times. So I had to get a 10-year visa. And currently, while I'm in the U.S. for 3 months, I'm doing Thailand visa and China. China you can't get. You need to get the visa. Thailand, you can get a 30-day visa on arrival, but I want to stay there longer without having to exit and enter the country. So I'm also doing a 10-year visa. But we're very lucky. And when I travel with my friends who are not from America, it's very sad that people can't travel to other countries.
Hi, I'm Dinesh. You gave a great talk because personally in my life, I also had this very long phase in which I was pursuing something that I didn't realize was not something that I wanted, but mostly that somebody put it there, and it's mostly the story about emigrating to the US because the US is a great country, everything will happen into the US, and so on. And I think it's great that people like you share that you can make a life that is not outside of the norm. And my question is that you explained in the beginning that you had this thought from which everything kind of changed. And I hear a lot of stories like that, and from my experience that it is true that you had that thought, but mostly you actually listened to that thought because there was a change that was happening before. So my question is, what do you think started happening before that allowed you to listen to that thought and think maybe there's something about this that I can change? I don't know if I explained myself right.
Yeah, it's just competing lives, maybe. So as I mentioned, I've had this trust in the back of my mind that I wanted to travel, I wanted a career, and I've been thinking about that since probably younger than high school. So it's something I've always been thinking about it, and maybe as I was getting closer to childbearing age, that pressure became even more because I was in my late 20s, and I'm like, okay, by now, I should be probably married if I want this plan to be on track. And if you had to give up, that's what I always think. If you had to give up one thing, to make your other things happen, what would you give up? One example is when I started being a nomad, I got a remote job. That was one of the catalysts for doing it. I was like, I have a remote job, I'll quit everything. And I was too overwhelmed. At the time, I was doing my newsletter. I was planning the first Try Swift Tokyo, which was crazy at that time because I didn't know how I was going to make it happen. I've never planned a conference. I was doing Natasha the Robot blog, and then I had my job that was 8 hours a day. And I became a nomad, so I was walking around streets of Amsterdam. I'm like, I want to travel more. I don't even want this. And I knew I had to give up something. And unfortunately, giving up my job was sort of the thing that was I felt like I have to do all these cool things I'm excited about, and I have to work for 8 hours a day, which is a big thing. So the giving up the job was the almost no-brainer because the other things were the ones I was passionate about, and I think it's a similar idea. I wanted the career, I wanted the travel, and I was supposed to want the kids. And when I gave that up, the things I really wanted, that came all into place. So hopefully you can't really, I was a psychology major in high school, in college, so you can't really know where your thoughts come from. Whatever your reasoning is, it's very confusing, but if I had to explain it, that's how I would explain it. And I'll be around outside. I don't know.
Last question. First of all, I wanted to say that I'm very inspired by you, and thank you so much. Your talk was totally great. I got a lot from it. But I have one question on the traveling part. How did you separate yourself from maybe your loved ones or people who needed you or still may need you, maybe your grandparents, your mom, or what have you? How do you work those type of things out when you're all over and it's just if they only had you right there and they never can rely on you because you're out of the country or doing you, enjoying your life?
Yeah, so I don't have a good question or a good answer for that, except I'm a bad family person. But no, we have a WhatsApp. You have to give up something, right? So we actually have a WhatsApp family group, which is not taking care of them or being next to them, but we have a family group, and then we post kind of photos about, hey, this is what's happening in our lives, and then I keep in touch with Skype, calling. But you're right, the burden, I have sisters, but the burden of things going bad, my mom has to deal with my grandma, or my mom has surgery and my sister was there to be with her. Yeah, I visit my family once a year. We might see each other in different countries, but, I'm not there for them. That's the truth.
You're a strong person. Very strong. I'm inspired.
Thank you again. We'll have a short break while we're